Welcome, Gunrunner.
Now, those of you who have been following my channel for some time will be very familiar with my Greatest Arcade Game series, where I looked at the 20 most important coin-ops released in each year from the dawn of the industry in 1975 to the time when consoles started to catch up technologically, 1995. So that was 20 games for each year across 20 years. 2020 vision, I guess you could say. After that timeline was completed, I produced two more bonus videos, one looking at my own top 20 arcade games and another top 20 that was voted for by you, my viewers, and the retro gaming community at large. I fully intended to stop right there and not do any more, but then I ended up doing one on 1996, not just because you, my lovely viewers, were asking for more of these videos, but also because I was moving house and needed to make several weeks of videos in advance, making my usual schedule impossible. I then ended up doing 1997 as well, as I went on holiday and faced the same issue, and now, over 1 year later, I'm in the same position yet again, as I'm off for a couple of weeks in the winter sun. But given how much you usually enjoy these videos, I'm sure you'll be happy with this replacement to my normal schedule, and I'm sure we'll get up to the year 2000 eventually too. So what was so special about 1998 then? And what were the themes of this particular year? Well, fighting games were still all the rage, with a few completely new titles, as well as additions to several well-established franchises. There were also plenty of new racing games, a staple of arcades to this day, some nice new vertical shooters, and absolutely loads of light gun shooters, which very much seemed to be the latest craze. What was very noticeable once again though, was the huge lack of innovation, with very few new and original titles. Almost all the games on this list are sequels and follow-ups to existing franchises. That's not to say there was nothing worth playing though, as you'll shortly find out when I start the countdown. And with those fateful words uttered, I guess it's time to have a closer look at the 20 greatest arcade games of 1998. One-on-one fighting game Battle Trist is one of only a handful of games created by Konami that uses the hardware from the unreleased 3DOM2 console. It was their third attempt at creating a 3D polygon puncher to emulate the likes of Virtua Fighter and Tekken, and is certainly better than their previous attempts, even if it did also fail to set the world alight. Still, it has some interesting features, such as the use of real Japanese animation by acclaimed film director Mamoru Oshii and artist Shujiro Hamakawa, which makes it worth looking up. By 1998, light gun games had become a key staple of arcades, just as they still are today, and the success of Sega's House of the Dead games played a big part in this. American arcade giants Midway wanted a piece of this pie, and so came up with a similarly horror-themed carnival. But rather than zombies and undead animals, we're now blasting away gruesome clowns and sideshow freaks, and it's certainly a lot of fun while it lasts. Atari's California Speed is an enjoyable spin-off of their own San Francisco Rush series that dials back on the more extreme elements and goes for a more realistic racing experience. It features a very impressive 14 different tracks that are all set across California from the coast to the desert and are defined by one of three difficulty levels: easy, advanced or expert. There's also a wide selection of different cars too, though none of these are real ones sadly. As well as being a sequel to the original Gunbird, which was released 4 years before, this was also the first Psycho shoot-'em-up to include medal chaining, a feature that rose to prominence in the Strikers 1945 series. What makes the game notable for its era is that you get to select from one of 7 different flying characters rather than just controlling a boring old spaceship, and the anime-style visuals that help define the themes of the fantastical plot. Released just a year before, the original Bloody Roar proved to be a pretty popular game that was noted for its rather unique animal transformation gimmick, so it was no surprise to see a sequel follow. Like before, this game is probably better known for its subsequent PlayStation port, but the arcade original is certainly superior. In terms of gameplay, there isn't much new on offer other than more characters and extra moves, but that's certainly no bad thing.
Bringer of the new age.
Another game to use the 3DO M2 hardware, this is also another game to try and cash in on the huge success of Sega's House of the Dead. What makes this horror themed light gun shooter particularly interesting, however, is that it features 3 very distinct endings: good, bad and normal. These are decided by various decisions you take through the game itself, as well as collecting specific objects. This makes it a bit less brainless than many similar titles. Psychic Force 2012 is a game that's gained a bit of a cult status over the years, mostly for its subsequent PlayStation and Dreamcast ports, but that doesn't dismiss the importance of the arcade original. A sequel to Taito's 1995 coin-op Psychic Force, this game really stands out compared to other one-on-one fighters of the era, with its totally unique flying mechanics and psycho meter, which very much defines the way you execute your attacks. Tecmo's Cool Borders is a rare example of a game being released for a home console first, in this case 2 years before making it over to the arcades. You can see why Tecmo snapped up the rights to it too, as it's perfect arcade fodder, but one that you really need to play in an actual arcade so you can make the most of the unique snowball controller that you stand on for ultimate realism. Chances of finding one in the modern day, however, are very slim. I first got to sample the delights of Virtual On from its terrific Sega Saturn port, but I wish I got to play the original arcade version in its huge multiplayer sit-down form with its big twin sticks, because as good as the home version was, it was never able to properly replicate this. A cross between a one-on-one fighter and a mech game, it requires quick reflexes, great hand-to-eye coordination, and total focus if you're going to succeed and come out victorious. It's fair to say that the original Street Fighter EX got somewhat of a mixed reception, being heavily criticised by the existing Street Fighter purists, but it didn't stop Capcom having another go. But the question is here whether it was worth their while. Probably not, in all honesty. Street Fighter was always better as a 2D game, but they did add some interesting new features such as guard breaks, super cancelling and XL combos that influenced the later games. If you want an underrated arcade game from 1998, they don't come any better than Sega's LA Machine Guns, a coin-op that really deserves to be better known. The sequel to the equally excellent Gunblade New York from 1995, it could also be described as an evolution of the brilliant Virtua Cop series too. This is non-stop light gun shooting at its very best, and is even better when you team up with a friend to take on those naughty criminals. Although the name doesn't make this completely obvious, this is the third game in the Riot Fighter series and the sixth game in the wider Riot franchise. All the features from the previous games return, with the only real upgrades coming in the visual department. This very much follows the Riot mantra of "if it ain't broke, don't fix it," and made the game as instantly accessible as its predecessors, proving popular in a world where bullet hell shooters were very much taking over. As we get towards the top of the chart, we will start seeing a lot of Sega titles, as the company really did rule the arcades during this period, and right here we have a sequel to one of their most iconic coin-ops of this era. The biggest change in Daytona USA 2 was the addition of different drivers to select from, but the slingshot drafting techniques also deserve a special mention, as these have very much become a staple of arcade-style racing games in the present day. It's interesting to note that this was actually the second time Sega had released an arcade game based on the original Star Wars trilogy, with the original game arriving in 1993, and of course that was very much influenced by the even earlier games by Atari. This one is very much the same, but has been given a pretty significant graphical upgrade. In fact, it's not unfair to say that the effects on offer look better than the movies it's based upon. Although it's actually the sequel to Soul Edge, it's fair to say that Soul Calibur is not only the much better remembered game, but also the one that defines the series going forward. It also played a huge part in the early success of the Sega Dreamcast, but it's better than Arcade Perfect port. Probably the biggest innovation of this game was the 8-way run. Previous 3D fighters featured much more restrictive movement than Namco's prestigious title. And from one 3D fighting game to another, as we move from Namco back to Sega and their sequel to the highly underrated Fighting Vipers, which is still one of my all-time favourite Sega Saturn games. The game is very much more of the same, retaining the ability to smash your opponents through walls and break armour. The only real difference here comes in the form of several new characters, including secret ones who need to be unlocked.
Select your Viper.
Given the huge success of the First Time Crisis and its unique duck gimmick, it was always obvious that a sequel would follow, and in 1998 Namco delivered the game everyone had been waiting for. The big feature that brought people flocking back to this follow-up, however, was the cooperative two-player mode that also utilised twin screens, unlike similar two-player light gun shooters of the era where you always shared the same viewpoint. I'll just come out and say it, Sega Rally is one of my all-time favourite video games. It just blew me away when it first came out and I couldn't wait for this sequel. Whilst this doesn't break any new ground like its predecessor, it does have plenty of new features, including more circuits with multiple routes, loads of new cars and different weather conditions. It's just a shame that the subsequent Sega Dreamcast port wasn't as impressive. Also known as Dynamite Deca 2, this was the sequel to the game we knew in the West as Die Hard Arcade, most notably on the Sega Saturn of course. By 1998, scrolling beat-em-ups had died a death unfortunately, with boring identikit one-on-one fighters taking over. So when a game like this arrived, I was so excited, and I certainly wasn't disappointed when I got to play it. The later Sega Dreamcast port also remains a real favourite of mine too. Now, you've probably noticed that there was a distinct lack of innovation in the arcades of 1998, much like today really, so the release of Gauntlet Legends was a real moment of wonder. Previous attempts to take Gauntlet into 3D had very much failed, the technology just wasn't ready, but Gauntlet Legends finally did it, and with it Atari delivered a truly deserving follow-up to one of the greatest arcade games of all time and a multiplayer must. And that rounds up my look at the greatest arcade games of 1998. Are there any others that you can think of that should have made the list, or do you disagree with any of the entries that I did include? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Dos Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Grady Haynes, Mark Strickland, Kalimatorn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tebby Kitsune, Alan J. Dodds, Your Eyes Are Bleeding, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.